In this video, we're going to take a look at the trigonometric ratio section from the skills review package, in case you've forgotten how to do it. So this is also known as SOHCAHTOA, that's what we tend to call it, because it talks about the ratios sine, cos, and tan. So if you take a look on the side, we have a right angle triangle, so SOHCAHTOA only works for right angle triangles. And it has that sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan is opposite over adjacent. Now, hypotenuse is always the side across from the 90-degree angle. It should be the longest side in the triangle. And then the opposite and the adjacent actually depend on the placement of the angle. So if the angle is here, the side across from or opposite the angle is my opposite side. And then the other side that's beside the angle or adjacent, that's what adjacent means, it means beside, becomes my adjacent side. Now, this angle actually has two adjacent sides, but one of them happens to be the hypotenuse, which we've already labeled. So when you're doing a question and you want to use SOHCAHTOA, you need to make sure that it is a right angle triangle. And then what you want to do is you want to start by labeling your sides. So the first thing I'm going to do is label the opposite, the hypotenuse, and the adjacent sides. So the hypotenuse is the easiest one to start with. It's across from the 90, the longest side in the triangle. So that's my hypotenuse. And then I locate my angle. The one across from the angle is the opposite. And that third leftover side is my adjacent. So when I'm trying to decide a ratio, I look at what information I have and what information I'd like to figure out. So I notice that I have a 4-meter marking here, and I'd like to solve for x. So I'm interested in the adjacent side and the opposite side. I do not know anything about the hypotenuse, and it's not labeled. I don't really care about it. So I'm going to be interested in using the opposite and adjacent sides. So if I look at SOHCAHTOA, the one that has the O and the A, the opposite and the adjacent, is my tan. So we are going to use tan of theta. Theta is just a Greek letter that we often use for angles, equals opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to substitute in tan of 71. Now I have to admit that angle does not look like 71 degrees. It kind of looks more like 45. So my guess is my numbers aren't going to look quite right when I get my answer. The opposite side is x. My adjacent side is 4. So to solve for x, I need to get rid of this dividing by 4 by taking it to the other side. So we're going to take it to the other side and multiply. So we're going to do 4 times tan of 71 equals x. And then I need to use my calculator. So first thing you want to do when you're using your calculator is you want to make sure that it is in degrees. Since we're doing degrees, there's a little degree symbol there next to the 71. So you should have a little D or a DEG. And if you don't know how to switch it, you can look at your manual or you can ask me when you see me, and I can help you out with that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to type in 4 times. Now, if this were a calculator where I could see the word tan, I would hit tan first, but this calculator doesn't do that, so I have to put the 71 in first and then hit tan and equals. And I ended up with 11.62 meters. And because I rounded, I'm going to put a little dot there to show that it's an approximate answer and that I had to round my value. Now, obviously, this does not look like 11.62 meters in relation to that 4 meters, but that angle to that 71 degrees really is not correctly marked for the shape of this picture. Okay? All right, so if I take a look at the next one down here, same thing, there's a right angle. So I'm going to try using my SOHCAHTOA. So I'm going to label first. So the one across from the 90 is always the hypotenuse. And then I locate the angle. The one across from the angle should always be the opposite, and then that third side will be the adjacent. Now, I know the opposite, I know the hypotenuse, I don't know anything about the adjacent, and it doesn't ask me to solve for it, so that side is the one I am not going to use. So we're going to look for the ratio that uses the opposite and the hypotenuse, which is the O in SOHCAHTOA, so we're going to use sine. So sine of theta is opposite over hypotenuse. So sine of, now this time I don't know the angle, it's just x, is opposite 10 over hypotenuse 25. Now, to move a sign to the other side, I can't just divide by sign. It's not a number. It has its own operation. So to get a sign to the other side, we do the inverse sign, which looks like a sign with a little -1. So I'm going to take the sign, the inverse sign of both sides. So on my calculator, because I don't see sign when I press sign on my calculator, I'm actually going to do the fraction first. Oh, I'll put it over here. I'm going to do 10 divided by 25, get my number, and then I'll notice that above the sign button, there's the sign with the -1, the inverse sign. So I'm going to do second and then sign, and I get 23.5, approximately 8 degrees. And since I rounded, I'm going to put that dot over the equal sign. Now, if I had a calculator where when I pressed sign, I actually saw the word sign show up on my calculator, I would have done second sign, bracket, and then 10 divided by 25, close bracket equals, and you would get the same answer. Okay, our last one here, same thing. I'm going to start by labeling. So across from the 90 is my hypotenuse. I locate the angle. The one across from the angle is the opposite, and then this side would be the adjacent. So in this case, the opposite side is the one I do not know anything about, and it isn't labeled, so I don't really care. That leaves me with H and A, ha, or ah, if you do it the other way around. So that's the ah from SOHCAHTOA. So this is going to be cosine of theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. So cosine of 40 degrees is adjacent 11 over hypotenuse x. Now this is where people have a little bit of trouble. When the x is in the denominator, I can't just move the 11 to the other side. What I need to do is get the x out of the denominator first. And I'm going to do that by multiplying it to the other side. So I get x times cosine of 40 equals 11. And then to get the x by itself, to isolate it, we're going to take that cosine of 40 to the other side and divide. Now, an interesting question is, how do I know when I'm supposed to divide, like we are here, and when I'm supposed to do the inverse operation? You'll notice here the cosine has a number with it. It's cosine of 40. So we want to take that entire thing to the other side, and we're doing x times cosine of 40. So the opposite of multiplication is division. Here, there's no number with the sign. It is not sine of a number times x. It is actually sine of x. So we're just moving the sign, which is when we do the inverse sign. Another way to remember is that when you're solving for an angle, that's when we do the inverse. And if you're solving for a side, that's when we divide. That kind of rhymes. All right, so on my calculator, I'm going to do 11 divided by, now, once again, you could do cosine of 40 if it shows up on your screen. Otherwise, I have to do 40 and then cosine equals approximately 14.36. And then that's going to be centimeters. Use a little dot there to show that it's approximate. And that's SOHCAHTOA.